This episode is brought to you by the Colfax Avenue Business Improvement District. It's Indie Week on Colfax, July 14th through the 20th. Celebrate the independent spirit of Denver's most iconic street with a full week of events, exclusive deals, and local pride. With over 40 participating businesses featuring food, art, music, tattoos, and more, Colfax has something for everyone. Don't miss it. Plan your week now at colfaxav.com/IndieWeek. That's colfaxav.com/IndieWeek. Today on CityCast Denver, are cheap electric vehicles a thing of the past? Could Colorado become a leader in geothermal energy? Is gas-powered lawn equipment even legal anymore? Two environmental reporters join me to break down the biggest climate stories impacting the Front Range right now. Today is Thursday, July 17th. I'm Bree Davies, and here's what Denver's talking about. Nishan Thakur, welcome to CityCast Denver.
Thanks so much.
And Sam Brash, welcome back to CityCast Denver.
Always glad to be here.
So you two are climate reporters for CPR. We wanted to check in. You've done some great reporting over the last couple of months on a variety of topics. So this is going to be a little bit of a climate roundup. Let's start with the environment under Trump. Trump's new budget bill has EV incentives slated to fall away in the coming months. But Sam, you reported Colorado is also reducing its EV rebates. What's changing?
Yeah, so EV rebates were always scheduled to go down in Colorado. The idea is you kind of kickstart an EV market, get buyers interested in those cars. And then as that happens, you don't keep spending taxpayer dollars on helping people like incentivize those cars. So what already happened was that the state incentive for a new car went from $5,000 to $3,500 at the beginning of the year. And then it was scheduled to step down again at the end of this year. When state lawmakers put together this whole package, they also wanted to keep the budget in mind. So they said, well, if our budget revenue isn't growing by, I think it's 4%, if it's growing by less than 4%, we're going to cut those incentives in half. So it means that at the end of the year, this state incentive that not that long ago was worth $5,000 is going to be worth, I'm pretty sure, $750.
Ooh.
So it's going way down. And then at the same time, you have Trump's budget bill, which is completely scrapping a federal incentive worth $7,500. There's probably not a state in the country that has done more with EV incentives. I think we talked last year about dealers offering leases for as little as $10, $15 a month on like a Nissan Leaf, on an entry-level Nissan Leaf. And I think Colorado really proved this promise of EVs being a great solution for working class, lower income people, because you don't have to pay for gas anymore. Electricity is a lot cheaper. The maintenance costs are so low. If you can just get over that initial hump, this is like a great way to drive around a city, especially one like Denver that's so spread out and doesn't have great transit. So that's all been working, but now we're heading towards this big cliff and nobody really knows what it means. Nobody knows if Coloradans are just into EVs now and we'll keep paying for them, or if we were into them because they were cheap. And now they might be less cheap.
That's kind of the question, I think, is like, were we just into them for the rebates? Because I'm also thinking about, like, a few months back, we were seeing a lot of protests at Tesla dealerships and even vandalizations. Mm-hmm. Do you think that's would that change our relationship at all with this mode of transportation?
Protesting Tesla dealerships?
Yeah.
I think that was, having to do pretty specifically with the political work of Elon Musk and less to do with EVs themselves. I don't think people were like, God, I hate this like battery powered car. And that's why I'm firebombing a Tesla dealership. From everything I've read, that had to do with, political misgivings. And, there's a lot of other EV options. I think if anything, Tesla is not the biggest EV car maker in the state. It's Nissan. And that goes back to, just those really, really cheap cars.
It's so interesting because you mentioned like, okay, the rebates are to get people into this new thing. But I just wonder, like, are people just going to go back to gas powered cars? Are we just going to like, are the rebates really going to change the trend that we've been on?
Yeah, I don't I think the trend we're going to be on is going to continue, but it won't happen as fast. We had a moment last year where during a fiscal quarter, 30% of new cars sold in Colorado were electric vehicles, were plug-in vehicles. That put us briefly ahead of California, right? Like we were setting the pace for the country. It's already going down. It's probably going to go down further. But I do think that, and I include myself in this camp, like once you drive an EV, you're like, yeah, this is better. Like I hate going to the gas station. I hate paying for gas. This is faster. It's quieter. It's a better car and I like it. So there's definitely going to be people who feel that way. I think what's so frustrating for me is just like what we talked about earlier, that like promise of EVs as a solution for people who want to drive cheaply and want something that like works. And that exists in Europe. It exists in China. There's like these cheap entry level cars that aren't very much money. And something that's just kind of, I think, a bummer about the US EV market is that they are mostly still luxury cars, like these big Rivians that are really, really expensive. Like, give us a little hatchback, $20,000. Just that you can do it. You have the technology to do it. Like, give us that car. So that's how I feel about it, is like these incentives have made that possible. But at the same time, car makers could turn around and say like, okay, like we're losing this, but we still want to have a really affordable entry level option. There might be things like that, like the new Chevy Bolt coming out, the new Nissan Leaf coming out. But like, is it going to be cheap enough now without these incentives? I don't know.
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, the difference between a Rivian and a Leaf, price point wise, is crazy, but they're using the same technology. And I don't know. It's such an interesting market. My mom just drove away from my house in one of the Leafs, and she loves it. Yeah. Like she'd never go back.
Right. There you
go. So you also reported that State Representative Alex Valdez, a Denver Democrat, said he's looking into whether the state could boost its tax credit through a new fee on the oil and gas industry, because that industry is likely to, quote, get windfall profits from Trump's budget bill. Do you think that that's a realistic idea?
I'm not going to comment, I guess, on whether I think it's realistic or not. The oil and gas industry is very politically powerful. There's been very good analysis that shows that they don't pay as much in state severance taxes or different kinds of fees as they do in like red states like Utah and Wyoming. So, conceivably that might mean they could pay. But we also know that there's been a lot of brokering behind the scenes. The oil and gas industry has a lot of power to run ballot initiatives. And there was a grand compromise last year to keep those initiatives off the ballot in exchange for like the state not taking further action to put fees or new regulations or heavy new regulations on the oil and gas industry. I assume that would blow up that deal, even though it's just a handshake deal. So I don't know. We'll see. But what I learned from talking to Alex Valdez is that he's really upset, and he thinks that Colorado should step in and find a way to make sure that people still get some sort of incentives for EVs, and the state finds a way to pay for it.
And I'll just say anecdotally, I know that he drives a Tesla.
Yeah.
Because he's talked about it on the show, and he's really one of those like evangelists for this mode of transportation. Okay, well, let's switch gears and talk about geothermal energy. Ishan, earlier this year, you all, the climate reporting team at CPR, launched a series about geothermal energy. Why did you decide to do that?
Yeah, I think we sort of felt that here was an energy source that the Trump administration was not actually against. That was a form of renewable energy that they call it, energy experts call it baseload. So basically, can be all on all the time. It's not solar, it's not wind. When you talk to geothermal evangelists, they'll use this saying like, solar only works when the sun is shining, wind only works when the wind is blowing, but the heat beneath our feet is on all the time. And Sam and I and our editors sort of felt that this form of energy could have a moment under this administration at a time when, the Trump administration was going to pull back on subsidies for other types of renewables. So yeah, we felt it was a little bit unexplored, and there's a lot of geothermal energy potential in the state, and just a lot of cool projects going on. A lot of them are in their pilot stages. So whether they can actually be feasible to, power power a city like Denver, or provide heating and cooling to like a lot of buildings, not just one college campus, is still a little bit up for debate. But the energy source, at least in our reporting, clearly shows a lot of potential and can be price competitive with electricity coming from coal-fired power plants, or heating and cooling coming from natural gas.
Where is Colorado in this game? Are we lagging behind other states? Are we leading? Where are we?
I think in general, geothermal energy, this is what, one project developer told me. Generally, geothermal is seen as kind of a laggard. Like, it's not at the same place that solar and wind is now. Like, someone compared it to like geothermal development now is kind of like the Wild West of solar in the early 2000s. So I think Colorado is more on the cutting edge just in terms of like state incentives are available for it. The state is clearly into this form of energy just because the potential in Colorado is so high. So, and just because of where we are and kind of the thermal energy potential underneath the ground, like Colorado is well positioned to develop it in a lot of different ways. So kind of hard to say, I think around the country, if you weren't located near like some sort of fault line that had this like extreme heat, like you're only now trying to figure out how your geothermal potential will work.
I think we just saw this last week with the Denver Museum of Nature and Science actually looking at the idea of geothermal energy, which is when they discovered a dinosaur bone, which is a whole other story. Yeah. But
like, did their PR person like plant that dino right there? Like, I was like, this is like perfect. Like, wow, like you can't imagine a better outcome.
This episode is brought to you by Wild Iris Floral Studio. Looking for something fresh, fun, and beautiful to do in Denver this summer? How about flowers? They're beautiful and they smell really good and they grow from the ground. Kind of amazing. Wild Iris Floral Studio hosts floral arranging gatherings that are all about creative expression, community, and playful connection. Whether you're coming solo, with a friend, or planning a date night, you'll leave with a gorgeous, one-of-a-kind floral arrangement. No experience necessary. Your host, Megan, will be there with design tips and floral know-how. But more than anything, she'll encourage your inner creative to come out and play. Everything's provided, from thoughtfully sourced blooms to a cozy, inspiring space. Check out Wild Iris Floral Studio and follow along on Instagram at Wild Iris Floral Studio. Tickets are on sale now at wildirisfloralstudio.com. Come have fun with flowers. This episode is brought to you by Denver Health. When someone you love brings home a new baby, what might feel like a small gesture from you can mean the world to the parents. Denver Health, in partnership with Family Connects, offers free in-home nurse visits for parents of new babies born at Denver Health. It's just one more way Denver Health shows up for families when they need it most. When I had Montgomery, tried to stay in the hospital for as long as humanly possible because I was afraid to go home with the baby by myself and my husband. And then finally Greg was like, we've been here for like 5 days. Like, we should probably go home. For more information, visit denverhealth.org/familyconnects. That's denverhealth.org/familyconnects. I was terrified to go home because you're like being sent home with the hardest job you've ever had and you don't have any experience doing it. Denver Health is with you for life's journey.
I have to say, like, I don't hear a lot of folks who aren't people like us reporters talking about geothermal energy. So does it have a bad rap? Is it misunderstood? Do we just not know enough about it?
I mean, I think it's like entering the public conscience in a way, just because of like where we are now in terms of climate change. But, for instance, Colorado Mesa University in Grand Junction, since 2007 has had this pretty gigantic geothermal energy network that basically uses like water holes, pumps, like basically kind of using the heat of the earth as this giant battery to heat and cool a lot of its campus. And that's just been growing over the years. And, back in 2007, 2008, when they were developing it, like it was not because it was a renewable energy source. They were looking at a way to keep their costs down and kind of hedge against future energy price increases. And so, that's been going on for a really long time. And that's like one of the most efficient systems in the United States, potentially even the world. It just, the way it moves energy and shares it is like pretty remarkable. And yeah, that's just been going on for a while. But, there's all these upfront costs sometimes to do these projects. And I think just in this moment we are of like kind of understanding that we need this all of the above energy approach to like meet demand. The Trump administration will say that solar and wind shouldn't be part of that mix, which is very, hotly contested and
Sure.
definitely not the state's perspective. But I think it's been around enough, and now a lot of oil and gas companies are also kind of joining the mix too, because they have the technical perspective to do geothermal in a way that really makes a lot of sense.
Is this like the great in between? Like the environmentalists and the oil and gas folks could meet in the middle in some way? You guys are both like, I don't know.
It's complicated, right?
Yeah.
Like Ishan's exactly right. I think in this discussion, it's important to sort of separate out. There's two big kinds of geothermal, right? You can sink pretty shallow wells or even like dig up your backyard. And like Ishan was saying, like kind of just use the earth as a thermal battery. And like you have a heat pump in this little garage right now.
Yeah.
It's like it's exchanging heat with the air outside. And that works really well. It's just like a reversible air conditioner. If you put that same system into the ground, instead of having like a source of energy that is changing temperature all the time during the seasons and even during the day, you're underground, which is like a pretty consistent temperature. So it automatically becomes much, much, much more efficient. That's like one kind of thing. The other option is that you could drill down deeper and generate electricity, right? Like you could build a power plant. Colorado doesn't have a geothermal power plant right now. There's a few options and proposals we've both written about to do that in different parts of the state. And that's where like the expertise of the oil and gas industry is just the same thing. You got to drill down. You have to use technologies really similar to fracking. It involves like fluids and heat exchangers. And this is things these people are the experts in the world in. It's why we have so much natural gas right now. I think what's tricky is like natural gas is also still a very viable energy source. So are companies like Chevron going to do this as like an actual pivot to their business model or to greenwash their fossil fuel business?
The greenwashing is an interesting thought, I guess. But like, maybe let's talk a little bit about that. Is like, where does it fall within the clean energy conversation? Because you mentioned fracking, Sam, and like, that doesn't have a great reputation. You know what I mean? I mean, as a comparable way that this gets produced, but like where is it when it comes to the green aspect?
I mean, it's pretty great. Like, I don't know. There, like every individual project, you got to ask hard questions about like, what does this do to the water table? Are there drilling in safe ways? What sort of fracking fluids are you using? Like, sure, like ask all those questions. Those are really good questions about a particular project whenever it comes up. With geothermal electricity, it has some big advantages too, right? Like wind and solar takes up a lot of space, right? Like it's something that has to really spread out on the landscape. Geothermal is really small, right? Like they fit in, a tiny footprint. And as a result, it could be a really efficient way to use the space available to us and put that, base load electricity onto the grid without like building out, giant batteries and solar, right? So it could be a great complement to the wind and solar too, because like as a result of having a geothermal power plant, you just have to build way less of it. And there's studies that the governor has put out, and that's a big reason that he's so supportive of it, is that it like is such a great complement to wind and solar that, you don't have to worry about building as much. And as a result, everything could get a lot cheaper as we try to transition away from fossil fuels.
Ishan, is this better when it comes to climate change?
It's, it sort of, as Sam said, it fits into the conversation of like all the renewables. Like every renewable energy source has a set of like distinct trade-offs, right? At least for geothermal, like, I mean, I think if you are a green energy developer and you're thinking practically, The federal government is pulling back support for wind and solar. We just saw it in the bill that was passed. We see it in, potential upcoming policy changes. Geothermal is still on that list of projects that qualify for some of these tax credits into the 2030s. And that's pretty compelling if you're thinking about like what project will be able to be stood up with the least amount of resistance or, at least more federal support. There are, if you talk to a geothermal investor, they'll wax poetic about all the benefits, like very quiet, like small amount of emissions and stuff. At least in places that are not on, these like volcanic faults, like sort of as Sam mentioned, like we have yet to see these types of power plants come and be built at scale, when you're away from like a tectonic plate. So I think that is still kind of a big thing up for debate, but it does have these huge climate benefits of, very little emissions, like can generate a lot of electricity. Some of the projects that Sam and I looked at in the state for power generation, tap into these underground hot water, basically reserves, and then
the things that make the hot springs I love.
That, yeah.
Same thing.
Yeah. And then even for one project I looked at, it was just basically, water that pools up in these reserves after oil and gas has kind of had its share and, depleted those resources. So we're talking about water that will never be used for anything, basically, because it's so salty. It's so full of minerals and chemicals. If you can use that to make electricity, like that seems like a great use of a formerly capped or, no longer used oil and gas well. So, it has these advantages. But I think also, as Sam mentioned, like you got to ask these project developers a lot of hard questions. Will we see this at scale is still something that for power generation, still kind of an open question in Colorado.
Well, our last topic seems small, but I think it has a pretty big impact on the environment, which is lawn equipment.
Mm-hmm.
And Sam, so this summer, a new state air quality rule went into effect on June 1st, banning government entities from using small gas-powered lawn equipment during the summer ozone season. Who has to follow these rules?
Yeah. So who has to follow these rules is government entities. So that's everything from like a school district to a parks department. And then also if you're a landscaping contractor that has a contract with, say, the city of Denver or the city of Greenwood Village or something, you have to follow the rules as well. Now that does not include you and me as people who are like mowing their lawns or trimming their gardens. It does not include every other commercial landscaper who might be, mowing a private soccer field or something like that. And I think this is really critical. The state has said pretty plainly that these rules are new and they're not going to like fine people or enforce them very heavily at first. They want to focus on education. So for instance, the city of Denver, I wrote them and they were like, hey, I was like, hey, these new rules are in place. Are you guys transitioning to electric lawn equipment? And they were like, no, we are not. We have this huge budget hole and we just can't afford to right now. We've let the state know about that. We are reporting our usage of gas-powered lawn equipment. And that is all we have to do to comply with these rules right now. So it's one of those things where like, yeah, there is a rule on the book that you have to do this, but if you don't do it, it's not the end of the world. So
like you're saying, they said pretty much we're just not going to enforce it, but we're trying to educate people in the meantime.
Right. And when I pushed them too, I'm like, okay, when will you start enforcing it? They said, well, we'll see. We'll consider our options on a case by case basis. It's pretty clear. And, I think this is pretty in line with Governor Polis's approach to climate issues, that they just don't want to have a stick heavy policy approach. They want carrots. They want people that recognize the advantages of this equipment first and then do it for those reasons, not because they're
being forced to.
Right.
But also, I think, like you mentioned, the city of Denver's facing a budget shortfall. So investing in brand new electric lawn equipment probably falls pretty low on the list of things we're spending money on.
I would imagine.
So, Sam, in your article, you wrote about a commercial landscaping company that had to adjust their practices to be in compliance with the new air quality rule. What did they tell you about this new rule and how it's affecting their business?
Yeah, so they transitioned a few of their crews to handheld electric equipment. And I should be clear about this too, right? Like this regulation covers handheld equipment under a certain horsepower. So those big ride-atop lawnmowers and stuff, like that's not included. Chainsaws you might need for like fire mitigation, that's not included. We're talking about like leaf blowers, trimmers, smaller
They're really
lawnmowers.
handheld.
Yeah,
or like,
right.
sure.
Yeah. So they transitioned their crews, and I talked to those guys about it. They said the equipment itself is great. They haven't had any issue with like not having enough power to do the jobs they want to do. They really like that it's quieter. It doesn't shake as much. There's not like fumes blowing out of an engine straight into their face all day. So I think it has a lot of like advantages for the workers. The big drawback is just like batteries. Because these landscaping crews told me that it used to be that you would throw a couple of gas tanks in your trailer, you could be out on the landscape all day, doing work. Now you just have to be like much more thoughtful about how much battery you have, if you need to like double back to the trailer, get another one, how you're going to charge it at night, stuff like that. So that's the adjustment they're making. And all of them basically said like, yay, the battery technology's come a long way. It should keep improving, and that'd be great.
So it's kind of hard to wrap my head around how much lawn equipment contributes to ozone. Like, you mentioned a leaf blower or, I think about that, my neighbor using one, but you're talking about like large scale, like landscaping crews. Like what is the scale of this problem?
It's mind boggling, right? So there's a big difference between, most lawn equipment and like your car, right? Your car has all this like emissions control technology. That's what your catalytic converter does. Lawn equipment doesn't have that. And a lot of it, especially the smaller stuff, works on like 2-stroke engines, which burn a combination of oil and gasoline. That's why they're just like these smog machines. They put out, so much of the basic ingredients you need to make ground level ozone in the atmosphere. Those are volatile organic compounds and nitrogen oxides. And just like the one statistic that always gets thrown out there, which is true and is just wild, is like running a gas powered leaf blower for an hour releases the same amount of smog forming pollution as driving a car from Denver to Los Angeles. So
holy cow.
And that's not greenhouse gas emissions, right? We're not talking about carbon, but we're talking about the pollution that contributes to smog. And so in that respect, it's like, are you really cracking down on lawn care equipment? That seems like such a small thing. Like, it's kind of not.
That really helps put it in perspective, though, because that was like my last question was just like, is it fair to put this burden on landscaping companies over, say, the individual car driver? But to put it in that perspective, they can be equal, not equally, but you can see where this is a big contributor.
Absolutely. Yeah. And cars are still, a huge part of the problem here, right? But, Colorado's Front Range hasn't been in compliance with federal ozone standards for decades. We just have not been able to solve this problem. And the reason is so many sources of pollution. You have oil and gas well pads, you have traffic, you have factories, you have things like Suncor, and you have lawn equipment. If we want any hope of like ever getting into compliance with federal law, you kind of just have to go after everything, and pretty aggressively too. So a lot of air quality advocates, you might be saying like, oh, like, or should we really be going after landscaping crews? This is the extremely watered down version of regulations that they were considering. I mean, they were talking about banning the sale of gas-powered lawn equipment along the Front Range. They were talking about banning commercial entities from using this kind of equipment. That's not happening right now. And we'll see if they like pass stricter rules this November. They're going to reconsider lawn care at that point. The state will. So we'll see. But whether it's fair, I think landscaping businesses, it's a tough economic world to be in, from what I understand. The margins are pretty small. So sure, like like regulations aren't easy for any business, but like they do play a pretty big role in this problem we're trying to solve.
Yeah. And now I'm thinking about the Suncor conversations I've had with Noah Phillips from the Denver Post, and there's plenty of regulators going after them, to be fair. Like, could they do more? Yes, absolutely. But it's attacking a problem from all different sides, it sounds like.
Yeah, that's the only way it's going to work. And like, even then, just our meteorology, all the ozone pollution coming in from out of state, like it's still going to be here, but can we get it down to a level that's healthy? Seems possible, but hard.
Well, Sam, Ishan, thank you so much. This was so interesting.
Thanks so much.
You bet. Thanks, Bree.
That's all for today here on CityCast Denver. If you enjoyed this show, why not take a minute to tell your neighbor who mows their lawn at 7 a.m. about us? Rate the show wherever you get your podcasts and subscribe to our morning newsletter and learn more about us at denver.citycast.fm. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye-bye. Oh my God, dental technology really has come a long way. I was thinking about this the other day. I was like, oh, I used to have to spit in a tiny sink next to the